All right, time now for Media Watch. I'm joined here in the studio by France 24's Emma James. Hello to you, Emma. You're kicking off with a race, or a look rather, at the race to become the UK's Prime Minister. How are things shaping up on the ground?
Yes, certainly very interesting times in British politics right now. And of course, the next Tory leader will be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Britain's cartoonists having a lot of fun with this, Tory Story 6, because we are now down to 6 candidates and amazing caricatures in this image. Of course, Boris Johnson, the front runner, is in the middle there as Buzz Lightyear. This is by Christian Adams in the Evening Standard, if you want to take a closer look and work out who's who. It is quite tricky. But I think the drawings are pretty good too. This one from Peter Brooks in The Times is another great caricature. This was done before one dropped out, when it was the Magnificent Seven, but not all that magnificent. As you see at the bottom, he puts, "God knows where they're leading us, they don't." And they're all pointing guns at one another. And Michael Gove actually has his gun pointing up his nose, which I think is probably a reference to the fact that he obviously has admitted recently that he once took cocaine. So looking at some of the headlines in the papers, it's interesting to see that even some of the very conservative newspapers aren't necessarily going as strongly for Boris as you might have anticipated. The Daily Mail says, "Who can stop Boris now?" And that doesn't necessarily seem like the biggest of ringing endorsements. His biggest cheerleaders, though, are, of course, those at The Telegraph. He writes for The Telegraph himself. Yes. He earns £275,000 a year from them. And they have gone all out. There is certainly no attempt to keep their bias out of their coverage. This headline, they're calling for the Tory vanity candidates to drop out, because they're referring there to those who just squeaked through with enough votes, enough support from the Tory party to go through to the next round. We've got 6 at the moment. We will see whether that whittles down any further before the next vote. But interestingly, those who don't like Boris Johnson, there are lots of things circulating, but this particular quote I thought was interesting, coming from Max Hastings, who's a former editor of the Daily Telegraph and a former boss of Boris Johnson. He says, "Boris is a gold medal egomaniac. I would not take Boris's word about whether it is Monday or Tuesday." So really scathing words there from Max Hastings. And it comes on the heels, of course, of the Le Monde editorial earlier this week, where they said no thank you to Boris Johnson at the head of the United Kingdom, calling him a mini-Trump dedicated to sabotaging the EU. They accuse him of amateurism, flippancy and ignorance, and say that it would be a calamity for his country and for Europe if he were to get the keys to number 10 Downing Street. Seems to be a view shared in some publications across the Atlantic too. The New Yorker has this, "The Empty Promise of Boris Johnson." They called him Mr. Teflon, saying that he shrugs off his many blunders in the public eye with the help of others, because people seem to just be prepared to say, "Oh, that's just Boris."
All right, well, another British politician has been having a brush, you might say, with some fake news, Emma.
Yes, absolutely. Chuka Umunna was touted at one point to be potentially the next Labour leader, but he's quit the Labour Party. He then joined Change UK, which was an independent group, and now he's joined the Liberal Democrats. Earlier today, this tweet was supposedly dug up from the archives. It claims to be from June 2014. It says, "Lib Dem supporters, please stop asking me to join. I wouldn't be caught dead in a yellow rosette," and that's a hashtag Chuka promise. It spread like wildfire because, of course, there's already this idea that there's hypocrisy involved in him having quit not one but 2 political parties already this year.
Short space of time.
However, it turns out that this tweet is fake, and it is so hard to spot with these things
Increasingly
nowadays.
so.
So hard to spot that it was actually shared too by other members of Parliament. Even when people were tweeting back to them saying, "This is fake, you shouldn't be sharing it," they left it there for hours. It spread far and wide, as always is the case with these things. When it seems too good to be true, sometimes people aren't prepared to actually look at it and assess whether or not it is. But you can actually see, as this person points out, you can just about see a change there where it's been copied and pasted in. It is a Photoshop fake tweet. He didn't write that in 2014, and he hasn't deleted other tweets where he was critical of the Liberal Democrats in the past. It's interesting to see just how nasty some of the responses are to this, though. This is a gentleman, very much a Brexiteer, saying such wonderful hypocrisy from cowardly custard Chuka and his new yellow chums. Also from a former colleague, you might say, this woman hoping to be a Labour MP in the future, says, "I predict the phrase, and that's a chucker promise, will become a common parlance to describe con artists." And then you've got the little hypocrisy meter down below. And of course, these tweets are still up there. They haven't taken them down, even though I think it's been fairly widely reported that this is a fake tweet. This person saying that the reason you should have been able to spot it is there is no record of it anywhere. The date was very similar to today's. As I mentioned, he hasn't deleted any of his other critical tweets about the Liberal Democrats. So it really does prove that we need to be very careful when looking at things that may or may not be true. It's worth double checking before you hit retweet.
And always nice to have that little reminder of how to kind of, check out what a fake tweet is, because it's not as obvious as clearly this polemic has shown. All right, finally, some good news, perhaps. Well, is it good news? I don't know. Holiday makers, they don't often make headlines, but a little village in the south of France is getting excited about what some might say is some very special visitors.
Yes, absolutely. The former president of the United States, Barack Obama, and his family, they are all flying in. They're in this evening to the south of France, staying in a little village called Villeneuve-les-Avignon, in an incredible house. It does look absolutely startling. This is the place they are staying at. It's called the Pear Trees Farmhouse. It is amazing, and it should be, because it costs €55,000 a week to stay there.
Only?
According to the website. Yes, I don't know if they managed to get a special deal out of them, but anyway, 65 acres, pear orchards. It's absolutely beautiful. The whole village seems to be gearing up for this, and the whole area, really, because the president of the Guard department, where this is, actually tweeted, "Hi, Mr. President. I'm president of Le Garde, the French county you'll visit tomorrow. I would be thrilled to host you in our beautiful town of Uzès. Contact me if you are in," which I thought was lovely, wonderfully.
Very welcoming.
Yes, absolutely, and very unofficial in his invitation there. This one too, they do say they're going to be doing lots of sightseeing in the south of France, and the people who run the Châteaux de la Drôme, several chateaux, they're pointing out that there are two within just an hour's drive, or less than an hour's drive, of where they're staying. And what I love about this is they're not offering any freebies, but they actually say that if you buy a ticket to go to two chateaux, it will cost you less. I love that, as though the Obamas are going to be bargain hunting after spending $55,000 a week on that house.
Probably not, no.
Absolutely. The whole village does seem to be gearing up to this, according to Midi Libre. The tourist office has a star-spangled banner hanging out of the window. But the image of the day definitely goes to this chap. I don't know who he is. I'm hoping someone's going to find out. But he's out there in his pyjamas in the middle of the street with a sign saying, "Barack, if you are not there in 5 minutes, I go back to bed."
Well, it looks like it's going to be a busy few days for people.
Definitely, and their every move is going to be followed very, very closely by the French press. Certainly, it's unusual to see a holiday making quite so many headlines, but it shows that the French still are very interested in what the Obamas are up to.
Absolutely, and not that we're following their every minute, but in about 30 minutes they're expected to arrive. But hey, you heard it here first. Emma, thank you very much for our roundup of social media and, of course, the papers there as well.